Assalamualaikum viewers, I hope you are in best of your health. Welcome to episode number 9 of ISO 9001 2015 series. In the last episode, we started our discussion on clause number 4, which is context of the organization, and we completed clause 4.1, which is understanding of organization and its context. So I'm sure that discussion was interesting for you, and you got the idea that what exactly clause 4.1, understanding the organization and its context, is requiring. We discussed in detail that what sort of internal and external issues can be found which are having the capability of influencing the organizational quality management system, and documentation of these issues is not a mandatory requirement. So it is up to you. You decide whether you need to document these issues or not, but these issues, definitely the knowledge of these issues is extremely important, and that will be used in the establishment of quality management system. Today, inshallah, we will be discussing clause 4.2, which is understanding needs and expectations of interested parties, clause 4.3, which is determining the scope of quality management system, and clause number 4.4, quality management system and its processes. All right, let's start with the clause 4.2, which is understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Just keep in mind that in the early ISO standards in 1987 and then in 1994, the standard was completely focused on customer requirements, and it was requiring the organization to identify the customer needs and expectations and take appropriate steps to fulfill those needs and expectations. Then later on in 2000 version, the legal requirements, they are also included, and that dimension is also addressed within the standard. But this particular standard, 2015 version of a standard, it is talking about the needs and expectations of interested party. That means the canvas is broad now. It is not limited to customer, it is not limited to the legal bodies. Yes, organization wants to produce quality product and quality service, and yes, organization wants to produce it on consistent basis. But if you want to produce this consistent quality product and service, you are not limited to customer, you are not limited to the legal bodies requirements, because there are many different stakeholders. They are playing an important role. Your supplier is important, your employees are important, the banks are important, you are dealing with the insurance companies, they are important, you have the management, you have the investors, you have the other stakeholders. Now, unless and until you realize their requirements, you realize their expectations, and you fulfill their expectations, you will not be able to achieve your targets of satisfying customers and legal bodies in a consistent manner. So, according to this clause, you need to be aware of these requirements, you need to identify these requirements, and you need to take appropriate steps to fulfill those requirements and monitor your performance in this regard. The standard doesn't specifically talk about any documentation in this regard, but within the organization, different people might be aware of the needs and expectations of interested parties. You need to make sure that that knowledge which is maintained by various different people, maybe the procurement people might know about the suppliers well, the sales people might be knowing about the customers well, maybe the HR people might be knowing about the employees well. So those people, those departments, those functions, they need to contribute in identifying that these needs and expectations. So when a standard gives you the requirement related to identification of risk and opportunities at that point in time, and when a standard asks you to identify the processes at that point in time, those people, those departments, those functions needs to contribute and identify the needs and expectations. So once within the system these needs and expectations are identified, the risk related to needs and expectations are identified, the processor related to these needs and expectations are identified, then automatically you will be able to establish appropriate control and deliver the required expectations whatever they have from you. Personally, I feel that this particular clause is inherent within the clause 4.1 when we talk about the context of the organization. So this is one of the dimension of context of the organization, that you are identifying the needs and expectations of interested parties. So context talks in general about all the issues related to the organization, and one of the issue is the needs and expectations of customers, needs and expectations of suppliers, needs and expectations of investors, needs and expectations of employees. Because unless and until you keep these things in mind, you will not be able to take any actions against the risk related to these dimensions. So I feel that even if this clause is not there and only clause 4.1 is there, even then this particular dimension can be covered. So our next clause is determining the scope of quality management system. And I said at the beginning that if I'm developing the quality management system anywhere in any organization, I will consider this clause as the first clause of my system development, because before developing anything, before even identifying the processes or identifying the risk related to the processes, I need to identify the boundaries of my quality management system. So in any organization, there might be various different departments are there, functions are there, various different products are there, various different locations are there. So as a system developer, we need to identify the boundaries of our quality management system, whether the quality management system which we are establishing will be applicable throughout the organization, in all at all locations, in all the departments, or we are developing a quality management system for a specific location or for a specific product or for a specific service or for a specific function. So that is possible. We can reduce the scope of certification, we can reduce the scope of quality management system depending upon our needs. So there are organizations which are implementing the quality management system organization wide, and there are organizations which are limiting their scope to a particular function, a particular department, or a particular service. So it totally depends upon your need. In some organizations, at one location, multiple organizations are working together, so they need to define their scope in such a manner that their activities and their responsibilities and authorities are clearly identified as well. So in this particular clause, the standard demands you to determine the boundaries and applicability of quality management system, which is defined in form of the scope. And there are three main things which needs to be considered while writing the scope. You need to make sure that internal and external issues related to the organization, they are covered within the scope, they are considered. Requirements related to the interested parties, which are defined in clause 4.2, that is basically considered while writing the scope. And definitely the last but not the least, the products and services of the organization, they are basically considered, and their implications, their issues are considered while writing the scope. A scope must be available as documented information. This is the first place where a standard is talking about documentation. There are very few requirements related to documentation, mandatory documentation, and a scope is one of them. It is a mandatory requirement for an organization to have a scope statement as a documented information. Then, when you are writing the scope, you need to make sure that your products and services are covered within the statement of your scope. And the third thing is that it must provide justification for any exclusion. So if you are saying that a particular clause, for example, design and development clause is not applicable to us because we are not involved in design and development, so you need to provide justification. So any exclusions are possible. Standard is giving you this flexibility that you can exclude a clause, but clauses can be excluded only based upon their applicability. If they are not applicable, certainly you can exclude them. But within the statement of scope, you have to provide the justification that why you are excluding a particular clause. For example, one organization says that procurement clause is not applicable to us. So it's not by choice. You cannot say that because it is very difficult, that's why we are not implementing it, or it is very lengthy, or it is not in our control. No, it's not like that. If you don't have that particular activity, if you are not responsible for that particular activity, only in that case you can exclude those clauses. But even in that case, you have to provide justification within the scope statement. So, in a nutshell, whatever scope we define, all the applicable requirements of ISO 9001 and all the legal requirements which are applicable to those particular activities must be fulfilled by the organization. And if you are not meeting any of those requirements, you cannot claim the conformity to ISO 9001 2015 version. So any clause you are excluding, but it is applicable practically, you are responsible for that particular requirement. In that case, you will not be able to maintain the conformity of ISO 9001. So we will be ending our today's discussion here, and we will start our next episode with the clause 4.4. Clause 4.4 is basically the heart of ISO 9001, and that's mainly talking about the process approach and risk-based thinking. And if you eliminate all the other clauses from ISO 9001, but you just keep clause 4.4, that will be ensuring that you have an effective quality management system. That important this clause is. And if you eliminate clause 4.4 and you keep all the requirements of ISO 9001 2015, but still you will not be having an effective quality management system. So it's an extremely important clause. Just wait for the next episode. My recommendation is, if you read the clause before our next session, it will be beneficial for you. Once again, thank you very much for watching. And if you are not subscribed as yet, kindly subscribe the channel and spread the word about this training so other people can get the benefit out of it as well. And if accidentally you reached up to this particular episode, please note that we have started from the beginning. And if you want to learn ISO 9001, you can start from the first episode, and then you will be able to understand the concept in a better way. Once again, thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.